Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Cyrus Davis, and today I have another deck profile for you, this time on Archaludon EX with Dialga VSTAR. This deck recently won a 5,000 player tournament in Osaka, Japan, and their format is a little bit different than ours in a way that definitely benefits Archaludon. So it hasn't quite reached its peak yet in the current Surging Sparks format. However, the deck has definitely been overlooked to some degree in the current format. Many players, myself included, have taken the time to reevaluate this deck, given the result in Japan, even though it's not quite as strong in our format. And after playing quite a few games with it, I am ready to present my take on how to play Archaludon EX with Dialga VSTAR in the current Surging Sparks format. Let's start with the Pokemon. Of course, we have a 4/4 Archaludon EX line. Archaludon EX's ability allows you to, when you evolve into it, accelerate 2 Metal Energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon, and its Metal Defender attack does 220 damage and prevents weakness done to it on your opponent's next turn. This is very relevant, specifically for Radiant Charizard, also some more niche stuff like NTV or Gouging Fire, but primarily for that Radiant Charizard when you're playing against the Charizard matchup. And this ability is what makes Archaludon EX work. Allows it to set itself up, and if you pick it up with something like a Professor Turo scenario, you can just reestablish it right away. The 220 is, it could be a little bit higher, but it's a good number. It allows you to one-shot most 2-prize Pokemon, allowing you to sort of play this just knock 3 2-prizes in a row game out, whether it be like 3 Teal Mask or Teal Mask, Fezandipiti, Squawkabilly, just trying to keep using Archaludon EX over and over again, while either healing it with Turo or bossing up 220 or less HP 2-prize Pokemon. Of course, you don't have to always win that way. You can also, throw some single prize knockouts in there and get into what we're going to talk about in a second. But that is the key to what makes Archaludon EX so efficient. It sets itself up, it does a good amount of damage, and it is very tanky. Next, we have the 2/2 Dialga VSTAR line. So this isn't a mandatory inclusion in Archaludon, but I think it is worth it. It makes the deck significantly better. It just gives you a huge option. Basically, you can use 2 Archaludon EX to set up Star Chronos in one turn by putting 4 energy on it and then attaching 1 energy for a turn. And then you can just go ahead and take a 4-prize turn. That is typically going to be the goal with this deck. You can also, allows you to take a 2 prizes in a row before your opponent can get a turn against some single prize decks like Gardevoir or Ancient Box, but primarily this is really nice to take a 4-prize turn by knocking out something like Fezandipiti and then taking a big knockout with Metal Blast. So this is good in pretty much any matchup. Just gets you extra prize cards basically faster. But the key to using this is in the form of using Boss's Orders or Iono. Your opponent, obviously, after the first knockout, is going to try to bring up something that they are okay with you knocking out. So typically, this means you're either taking 2 knockouts and Ionoing your opponent. Maybe you boss up their Fezandipiti, use Star Chronos, and then you Iono them on your extra turn. That way, you're getting rid of the Fez and Ionoing them at the same time. Or you can get rid of double Archeops if you go boss and then boss. Or you can take the coveted 4-prize turn by just bossing twice or knocking out their active. Even like a damaged Pokemon that's been hit by Metal Defender earlier. You can also, use this even when you are still at 6 prize cards by going Star Chronos on a Fezandipiti and then boss the Pidgeot EX and Metal Blast that once you attach 1 more energy on your extra turn. And that way you get rid of, your opponent's whole engine in 1 turn, and then they're forced to respond to Dialga right away. Otherwise, you can just take your other prize cards really quickly. So there's a lot of ways that you can use Star Chronos, but no matter what way you use it, realistically, it is going to be powerful. We play 1 of Fezandipiti EX just for the extra draw, like most decks do at this point. We play 1 Lumineon V just to have extra consistency. We don't play any onboard draw engine other than the Fez. We don't play the Barrel or Tatsugiri or anything like that. So Lumineon just to make sure that we keep finding supporters when we need them. Specifically, playing Boss and Ionos on the right turns is very key, or even the Turo. And then 1 Squawkabilly EX. I know this Not everyone plays this. I don't think the Osaka winning list played this, but I have found it necessary. I found the deck to be a little bit bricky, especially on the first turn. The first couple turns while you're trying to get your energy in the discard pile, trying to get some Duraludons onto the bench. So one Squawkabilly EX has helped a lot with that. And then the one of Radiant Greninja, just far and above the best Radiant in this deck, synergizes really well, lets you draw extra cards, and lets you get your energy in the discard pile for Assemble Alloy. Next, we have the supporters. 4 copies of Professor's Research, just playing the max count. We just want to draw through our deck really fast, get our energy in the discard pile, get a bunch of Duraludons down. That's the key. We want to get to a point where you have like Dialga V in play, and then 2 Archaludon EX in our hand, and 2 regular Duraludon on the bench. So just continuing to churn through our deck very quickly is very important. 3 Boss's Orders. Not quite playing the maximum count because our A-Spec, spoiler alert, is going to be Prime Catcher, so not quite needing 4 of those. We're also playing multiple copies of Pal Pad, but we do want to boss a good amount of turns. A lot of games we are going to want to boss 3 times in a single game, so it is good to play the full 3 copies. 2 copies of Iono, just so that we have a little bit of disruption. This deck typically tries to win in a sort of aggressive way. You have a lot of supporters that you'd rather be playing than Iono on most turns. Early game, you'd rather be researching, and then the mid to late game, you'd really rather be using Boss's Orders or Turo. If you're going aggressive, using Boss, and if you're taking it more passively, using Turo. But, of course, disruption is still important. There are going to be times where your only way to win is to Iono, and like I talked about, Star Chronos in combination with Iono can be a very powerful disruptor in particular, so we are still playing a couple of copies of those. Lastly, the 2 Professor Turo scenario. It just synergizes so well with Archaludon EX since it sets itself right back up and has so much HP. Also just allows us to reuse the ability if we're trying to set up like Dialga. If we have like only one Duraludon on our bench, we can just Turo, or if we have a Duraludon on our bench but not an Archaludon EX in hand, we can Turo one of the Archaludon EX up. Also just gives us some extra mobility with our Pokemon having a bit of a tougher time moving around the board, generally speaking. Next, we have the items. 4 copies of Ultra Ball, 4 copies of Nest Ball, just maxing both those counts out. We want to have as much Pokemon search as possible, and we can't play stuff like Poffin or anything like that. You could play something like Artisan, but that is not the stadium where we're going here. 4 copies of Night Stretcher. So the stadium that we are playing in this list is PokéStop. Now, we would probably be playing a pretty heavy count of Night Stretcher anyways. We want to keep getting energy back, especially after we Turo them away. And we play 4 research to keep drawing through our deck. We play Squawkabilly, so we're doing a lot of discarding of our resources, but especially with PokéStop where we're going to discard some stuff randomly, having the maximum count of Night Stretcher is really good for consistency. There's usually going to be a solid card that you can grab with Night Stretcher, whether it be Fez, or just an energy for concealed cards, or an energy for attack for turn. Or another Archaludon EXP, so you can keep chaining those back to back. 4 Night Stretcher really helps move the deck along. 3 Earthen Vessel, just to get out those energy early game, make sure that we find them and get them in the discard pile quickly for Assemble Alloy. Also gets us an attack for turn plus an energy for concealed card, so Earthen Vessel, obviously just a very good card. 3 copies of Pokégear, I would love to play 4, but I think the other cards are more important for our consistency. But we often want to make sure that we are playing the right supporters on the right turns. It's very important that we keep playing supporters every single turn. So 3 copies of Pokégear to try to find the right ones when we need them. Then 2 copies of Pal Pad. This helps a lot, especially in the late game. In long games where we want to cycle multiple Turo, 2 Pal Pad is great. This also helps a lot against both Pidgeot Control and Snorlax, where we can recycle multiple Turos. If we have to research away some of our key supporters, like Boss's Orders or Iono's early game, this allows us to Pal Pad them back in. And of course, we probably would only play 1 if we weren't playing PokéStop as our stadium of choice, but we are, so we might end up randomly discarding some supporters that we need as well. We'd already be playing 1 Pal Pad even with no Pokestops, but with 2 Pokestops in the list, 2 Pal Pad helps us avoid any bad discards. And lastly, our A-Spec. Now, this is probably a controversial choice. We have Prime Catcher. So I've seen Scramble Switch and Scoop of Cyclone in this list as well. I think that Scoop of Cyclone is definitely the correct choice if we see the meta become more like Japan's when the next set comes out, and Dragapult becomes like the most popular deck in the format by a large margin like it is in Japan, then Scoop Up Cyclone makes a lot of sense. You know, you are really relying on doing a lot of healing against Dragapult. But right now, Regidrago is the king of the format. And again, in the Regidrago matchup, healing can be good, but it is far more important that we are gusting every single turn because we want to win the prize race. Prime Catcher helps us do that. It's just the most consistent A spec. It allows us to make our plays as consistently as possible. We don't have to play any extra stuff like Iron Bundle or Counter Catcher. We just have the Prime Catcher, and that'll often cinch up the game for us at the end. Next, we have our Stadiums, Tools, Energy, 2 PokéStop. Like I mentioned a lot, this card just helps us draw everything we need, obviously. We play so many items, and everything that we can discard that's not an item is recoverable with our multiple copies of Pal Pad or multiple copies of Night Stretcher. So there's very little downside to PokéStop. Everything we can get back, and it just helps us find everything that we need. There's nothing that we need that we can't potentially find off of PokéStop. Then 10 Metal Energy. I was finding 9 to be a little bit low for finding them early game. We really want to find a lot of energy very quickly, especially if we're going for Dialga VSTAR in that game. So playing a 10 count just to make sure that we find them smoothly. Next we have our matchups. First we'll start with our positive ones. So we have Drago. Now Drago is definitely is still the most popular deck in the format right now. And it's definitely an important deck to take a positive matchup against. We want to be gusting against Regidrago every single turn. Usually Drago can't play the game without benching multiple Pokemon that are going to be in range of Metal Defender. So there will usually be 3 targets on board, but also if we manage to set up Dialga in this matchup, we can easily take a 4 prize turn with Dialga by like bringing up a Teal Mask, hitting it for 220 with Star Chronos, and then bring up the Regidrago V-Star and just Metal Blasting it. Radzard can be a little bit of a problem at times, but they can't use it on like a Archaludon that just use Metal Defender, so that can make things trickier for them. Generally speaking, this matchup is very good. They also can't really, they can't one-shot an Archaludon EX because they don't have any attackers that do up to 300. They can Phantom Dive, of course, to set up like 20 damage on a bunch of your Duraludons. That way they are in Lost Impact range. But that also wastes time on their end, and then you can Turo that Phantom Dive damage away. Next we have Dragapult EX. Kind of similarly to the Drago matchup where they just don't have any way to kill you, and you can just spam Turo a bunch of times, especially with 2 Pal Pad. We can play Turo up to 6 times in a game at most. Dialga will eventually come in to Star Chronos. It's kind of inevitable in this matchup. There's not a lot they can do to stop you as long as you just keep finding like Turos to heal off Phantom Dives. So eventually you'll be able to just like Star Chronos and take a 4 prize turn. Ideally, you want to put like you can put 4 energy on the Dialga with the Alloy, and then 1 energy for the turn that you start Chronos. So as long as you can attach 1 energy to the Dialga in advance, then you should be able to get up to 320 after attaching on your extra turn to one-shot a Dragapult. And then, of course, usually they have something like Fezandipiti or Rotom or Lumineon on board. So yeah, just spamming Turo is honestly, in and of itself, often enough against Dragapult as well. Then we have Snorlax. This matchup's definitely close, but I would definitely say it's favored. They have to get like pretty lucky and like Airy and Misfortune Sister away both of your Pal Pad to really beat you. Otherwise, you can just sort of set up a lone board of like 2 Archaludon EX, maybe 1 Duraludon, 1 Archaludon EX, and then Dialga if that gets stuck on board. And they play like Cornerstone, then you need a way to hit through your Cornerstone. But with 2 Turo and 2 Pal Pad, you have no problem getting around block, and you have answers to all of their Pokemon. You have answers to Cornerstone, you have answers to Mimikyu, and of course, you are able to set up very quickly with Alloy, so you can start attacking right away. It can be close, especially if they hit stuff on flutes, if they find like Greninja or Fez on flute, and then they force you to keep using Turos, and then they get rid of your Pal Pads with Misfortune Sister or Airy. It's definitely not a free matchup, but it is favorable. Then we have Miraidon EX. Now, this is possibly your best matchup. They just really struggle to ever knock out an Archaludon EX. They cannot use Ampy very much to knock out a Duraludon unless they play Zapdos, which most lists do not right now. So it's very difficult for them to ever take 2 prize turns as long as you don't bench too many things like Squawkabilly or Lumen. So you can easily just go ahead and use Metal Defender over and over again. They also don't play a lot of single prizers to try to offset your prize trade, and you can Turo their damage off. So this is probably your easiest matchup. The Roaring Moon EX matchup is pretty similar. They have lots of 2 prize Pokemon that they're reliant on, like Fezandipiti or Pecharunt EX, that you can go ahead and boss disorders for your first knockout. And then if they Frenzy Gouging you, then you can always respond with a knockout. You can Dialga VSTAR as well in this matchup. You can just sort of poke a Metal Blast after a Frenzied Gouging. You can Star Chronos for a 4 prize turn. And if they don't go for the Frenzied Gouging to one-shot you, of course, you can still just Turo their damage off. Both the Miraidon and the Roaring Moon matchups also you benefit from being a single prizer as a basic, so you don't actually have to mention any 2-prize Pokemon right away. So you can sort of play the same game that like Goldango does against these decks, where you always get the first 2-prize knockout and just start ahead on the prize trade. Next are even matchups. We have Raging Bolt. So this matchup, you're trying to play similarly to the Miraidon or the Roaring Moon matchup, but you're a lot more reliant on Dialga because they don't have to bench as many 2-prize Pokemon that are in Metal Defender range, since Raging Bolt stays just out of Metal Defender range, and they can also Bravery Charm the Pokemon they do, so if they only bench like 1 Teal Mask, 1 Fez, and then Bravery Charm both of them, this can get really tricky for you. So we're really reliant on trying to go for like setting up Dialga play and Star Chronosing something like a Fezandipiti or a Teal Mask that doesn't have a Bravery Charm on it, and then Metal Blasting or Raging Bolt for 2 prize cards. But if they set up really well and Bravery Charm their 2 prizers and are constantly just one-shotting your Archaludons over and over again, things get really, really tough. Then we have Cloth. So Cloth is just a very aggressive deck. They can try to prize trade you with the Cloth itself. You can sort of retreat or Turo out of the damage, but then if you don't, you will get finished off by poison damage going back into your turn after taking a knockout if they bring up the Baby Pecharunt to increase the poison damage. You can be a little bit slow to get started, so often they're going to take the first couple of prize cards if you miss turn to attack or something like that. But like the other matchups, you can still Turo heal. You can go ahead and set up a Dialga 4 prize Dialga VSTAR play. It's just they can use early poison damage to sort of soften up your Duraludons or take quick knockouts. And they can, even if they go first, use like Pecharunt. The same way that they try to donkey you with the Baby Pecharunt, they can do that turn 1, and then your Duraludon will get knocked out going back into their turn. So they can sort of start up 2 prize cards that way. Which makes it very difficult for you to try to use your support Pokemon. So you have to sort of set up without using your support Pokemon, since you don't want to bench easy 2 prizers for them to knock out. So the matchup is definitely not unfavored by any means, but there's a lot that can go wrong. Next, we have the Iron Thorns matchup. This is similar. As long as you get set up, especially with Dialga, this matchup should be a fine time, but Ability Lock is really strong. I mean, you can't use Alloy on Archaludon, so Archaludon's sort of out of the equation a little bit. You can, of course, set it up, but it's not really the line that you're trying to go for. And you can't use Fez, Squawk, or Greninja, so you have a lot less draw. If you get hit by too many like Judge and Crushing Hammers, you can just have a really bad time. If you can find your Dialga V and manage to get some energy in the discard pile, your ideal should be to just go ahead and Metal Coating and try to set up Dialga that way. But if they set up too quickly and just, respond to your Metal Coating with 140, you evolve, they 140 knock you out, things get really, really bad for you really quickly. So you kind of have to hope that you start well and they, maybe don't start quite as well. You can definitely buy time early game if they don't find like a feature booster, because it's your Duraludon, they do need a feature booster to knock it out. You can also just like sort of send up like Fezandipiti and then Turo it into a Duraludon, sort of just heal spam while you set up a Dialga V on the bench with a lot of energy, and then sweep their whole board with 1 Dialga VSTAR. But again, it just really depends on how well they set up, and realistically how well they draw off of your Ionos as well after they've taken some prize cards. Next, we have Pidgeot control. So Dialga VSTAR is really, really good against Pidgeot control. That is what we're trying to do. We're trying to set up like a quick 4-prize turn against Pidgeot. But they do have, definitely have answers, especially if they just sort of catch us with a dead hand off of something like a Fang Snipe. They can get rid of a lot of our resources that way. They can buy time against us with Mimikyu, forcing us to set up a Duraludon. They can go ahead and just Sob or Tempting Trap on our Greninja or something like that if we open it. That way we are slowed down on that front. They can also just sort of spread our energy around and then bring up something that doesn't have any energy on it, and then Fang Snipe Turo out of our hand. Of course, they can hit our Pal Pads, Mrs. Fortune Sisters, and Airy. I'd say this matchup is fine, but they just have a lot of options. We also don't easily one-shot Blood Moon, except with Dialga. So if we can't set up enough energy on a Dialga to Metal Blast because it's committed elsewhere, or we just don't have the resource in hand, we can just sort of get Blood Moon swept if they just keep penny looping a Blood Moon. We also don't want to bench too many 2-price Pokemon for that reason. We don't want them to be able to take too many prices too fast off of Blood Moon. Otherwise, they could just like Iono us to 1, and then we draw dead for too many turns, and we get rolled by Blood Moon. Negative matchups, we have Charizard. So Charizard, I'd say it's unfavored. I know that isn't necessarily the consensus. I think it's definitely close to even, but I think that if the Charizard player just sets up their Radzard with 3 energy as soon as you take your first 2 prize cards and then just starts swinging at you with Radzard, counter-catchering your Dialgas, things get really, really tough. And they can use Dusknoir to pick off your Duraludons. That way you can't set up for Star Chronos easily. You can go with the no Dialga route, but it's very easy for them to use Dusknoir to set up enough damage to one-shot your Archaludons. And usually they can get the first 2 prize cards, since you can't one-shot the Charizard, and they don't have to bench Rotom or Lumineon or anything like that. So I think that if you draw just a little bit better than them, you can definitely be fine, especially if you do set up the Dialga play, but there's just so much that they can do to prevent it. Next we have Lugia. Lugia, if you can go first and get like a turn 2 boss knockout on a Lugia, obviously the matchup becomes a lot better, especially if they have to use Lumineon V to set up. But generally speaking, if they go first or you just miss the turn 2 boss knockout, which is pretty likely, it's pretty tough to get turn 2 Alloy plus boss knockout. They can just set up a board of Chinchinos and just sort of prize trade you out of the game. Chinchino obviously has a good time one-shotting Archaludons. You can go for the sort of Dialga multi-prize turn, but as long as the Lugia player uses their legacy energy wisely and doesn't bench too many like Lumen or other extra 2-prize Pokemon that they don't need, they should be fine. Next we have Gardevoir. So Gardevoir, of course, we aren't playing the Jamming Towers in this list, which can make the matchup better, but with 2 Jamming Tower, it's really not going that far. You're still unfavored. So I'd rather just not tech for it and be more consistent. But without the Jamming Towers, they can, of course, just one-shot your Archaludons with Drifloons. They can even one-shot Dialga with Screamtail after some Munkidori damage. And they can also just sort of Iono, swing with Miracle Force. They have their own Turo, so they can heal your Metal Defender damage on Gardevoir off. They're playing the single prize game against you, so you need to attack so many times to get knockouts, even if they're not one-shotting your Pokemon. They just have a really, really easy time prize mapping you. Oop. Next we have Goldango. So another just tough matchup. We can't one-shot the Goldangos with Metal Defender, and Make It Rain easily one-shots our Archaludons. We can try to set up a Dialga play, but they don't have to bench Fezandipiti, so Star Chronos is only going to be taking at most 3 prize cards. If we go ahead and take a 1 prize knockout and then knock out a Goldango. And of course they have Togekiss, so they can potentially take 3 prize cards on our Archaludons as well. And if they set up Togekiss when they take the first knockout on a Duraludon, then they can take a 2 prize knockout on a Duraludon as well. So they just out-race you really easily. Unless they don't set up very well, there's just not really... If they draw decent, there's not really a win condition. Next, we have Lost Box. So this is similar. You can definitely do more with Star Chronos and Ionos in this matchup than against Gholdengo. It's very disruptive, and you can use the Star Chronos to sort of knock out multiple Comfies on the same turn that you Iono. That way they don't have a lot of ways to dry out of Iono. However, it's still a very bad matchup. Once they set up Pikachu EX and start one-shotting Archaludons with that, and then you can't one-shot the Pikachu EX back, so they can just one-shot another Archaludon right back again. I think the best plan is probably just to hit it with Duraludon's first attack. I think it's called Hammer In. So just like do a little bit of damage to the Pikachu, soften it, and then maybe Star Chronos it on your next turn. But it's just not a very consistent line, and it doesn't get you that far. As soon as you start having to use your setup Pokemon as well, they can sort of amp you very much. Squawks or Lumens, they can take easy 2 prize cards on the Fez. They can amp you very much in Radiant Greninja. And the Pikachu EX just puts in so much work against you, especially if they attack you with Pikachu EX twice and you have to deal with it twice. It's just a huge headache. I think your best bet in the Lost Box matchup is just if they have a slow start, they don't get Mirage Gate off very quickly. Maybe you can take like a 3 prize lead, and then you can sort of disrupt them with Iono in the late game, or go into Star Chronos. But generally speaking, if they set up well, that's another very tough matchup. That's all that I have for you today, though. Thank you so much for watching. I don't think this deck quite reaches its peak until next set for sure. It does have quite a few problem matchups. Charizard, Lugia, and Gardevoir are all very good decks right now. I mean, all of these decks are good, and you don't want to have 5 questionable matchups. However, having a good Regidrago matchup has to be something. I think that the deck definitely can keep up with all of the decks in the unfavorable tier, except for maybe Gholdengo and Comfy. I think that Charizard and Lugia especially are very winnable. Gardevoir, you definitely have play in the Gardevoir, especially if they have a slow start. And, having a good Regidrago and a good Dragapult matchup is really good right now. Even having a good Snorlax matchup, because that's always really popular in Day 2 currently. So I think that Archaludon, it probably wouldn't be my first choice for San Antonio Regionals, but I think that if that is something you're considering, that's a solid choice. I mean, honestly, I'd probably say that about any deck that's favored into Regidrago. I think that just having a good Regidrago matchup alone can probably carry events for you, especially if your local meta is specifically, that there's just going to be a lot of Regidrago and a lot of Dragapult, then Archaludon is a great choice. Also, if you don't have a ton of events coming up between now, or a ton of big events like San Antonio coming up between now and when the set with Badoo releases, this deck will be much better come next set. So try this list, get in some practice while you can, and then, you'll be ready to play the new and improved version when the next set comes out. That's all, though. If you want to check out my other content or socials, that will all be linked in the link tree in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.